So here WCF is Windows Communication Foundation. So this is the WCF, which is a Windows Communication Foundation. Basically, WCF is a development platform, or Microsoft provided development platform, which is used to develop, basically to be to develop the web services, right? Or we normally say that we normally use this to develop network related distributed services. So mainly this is something which is used to develop and deploy network related, something called distributed services. This is important. So mainly WCF comes in one of the three tiers of application, right? So whenever we design an architecture of application, right? So this comes as one of the tier. So let's first see what exactly are the application tiers we have. So this is important to understand what are the tier applications. So we have 1 tier, 2 tier, 3 tier applications here. So let's first understand what are the tier applications, and then we'll see which tier we are actually working for WCF. Right? So let's talk about when we say 1 tier application, it is like we'll have one single application which contains all the business logics, everything at one place, deployed in one machine and served, right? Which is your 1 tier application. So 2 tier application is something where you have your application, right? And you will have, let's take an example of a database, right, which is deployed in some other server, right? And we have your application layer being deployed in some server, which is actually communicating with each other, right? Where you have two different tiers which are working to serve your client. This is something which is two tiers, where this application can be your UI, which is your web, right? Or can be mobile app or anything where all of your business logics, everything is written in your application itself, which talks to database based on the required data. Right? That is your two-tier. Now, when we say three-tier application, right? Three-tier is the one which is mostly used network-related tier applications. When I say tier applications, remember we are actually talking about tier applications, right? Tier apps. So whenever we are designing some architecture of any application, right? So we normally follow this tier application format, and then we normally go ahead with the flow. So here we have an application, a three-tier application. Let's say you have your application, or normally it's a user interface, right, which is communicating with, let's say, some middle layer, right? And let's say middle layer is communicating with, let's say, one more tier called the database, right? So this is a typical three-tier application, right, where your middle layer can be a business logic layer or a web service, right, or any application interface layer, right, whatever it can be. This is a middle layer, and these are actual user interface where you are actually exposing this to the client, right? And middle layer talks to database for actually doing some business logic communications, right? So here you can see this middle layer is something where we are actually writing our web services, right? So web service is something which is a background process which we normally create, which is like a network service we create, right? Which can actually create some business logics so that the output can be provided to the user interface to display. Now this is something which is a 3-tier layer, and we normally create our web services. And for this web service development we are going to use WCF, which is a Windows Communication Foundation. Now how is it important? So whatever I'm writing in web service, right, I can directly write in my application itself, right? How does it matter? I can directly write my web service. So let's say this web service, let's say this database contains my student table, right? Student tables. And what I'm doing here, instead of getting that students directly from my UI, which is website, directly from database, right? What I'm doing is I'm actually requesting my web service to get me students, and web service is in turn doing some logical operations, right, connected to database and then getting back my students. Now why should I do that? Now the reason is that, let's say tomorrow you have to change this tech stack of your application. What does it mean, tech stack? Let's say your application is in ASP.NET, let's say, right, and you have to convert it to MVC. Simple conversion of your .NET framework platform itself, where you work on ASP.NET and you are completely changing your platform to MVC, which is again a website anyways, right? Then what you have to do? You have to convert all your business logics, everything in here. This is the same, same UI pattern you are changing. But let's say you have to provide your services to both web and, let's say, tomorrow to the mobile app, right? Then again, whatever business logics you are writing in here, again you have to copy it here again. Now, which means you are actually making things redundant, right? So instead of that, if I write complete business logics in my web service layer and just provide the interface, the information to display, then what happens? Let's say my web service contains all student information, right? And it is ready to push. So let's say I have a website, so I'm getting my student details. I'll display student details in this website, right? So that I can user can view. Similarly, let's say here I'm showing all the students. So let's take an example of Facebook app, Facebook itself. Let's say Facebook, whenever you open up your Facebook, right, you can see all the feeds, all your, let's say, different events happening, right, different friends, suggestions and all. Everything in single web page, right? From where you are getting from your web service, let's say. From web service, you have different services like get all friends, suggestions of friends, live feeds and everything. But when it comes to mobile app, right? When it comes to mobile app, let's say we are actually showing either feed, a live feed, or I can select an option to see suggestions and all, which means as per my request, if I want to see only feed, I'll access only feed and get it. Which means my main business is not, it is not changing, but I can actually change my way of showing the data to the user, right, which is the easiest. Now this is how the middle layer, which is our web service layer, will be used. Okay, that's it. That is the reason why we have to have a web service layer, which is a middle layer always, right, which can be used for communicating or actually writing about our business logics uh, in combination with the database to communicate to user interface. So in this context, we are going to use WCF technology, which is the latest technology of Microsoft to develop web services. Right? So let us see how we can actually create a simple web service, and then we'll see. So in web service, mainly, right? So this technology completely provides here you have so mainly WCF actually helps us to actually route the request to route the request to remote applications. Which means if you want to serve any third-party client, let's say any third-party client want to see my fields, right? So what I can do, I don't have to give him the business logic. Rather, what I'll do, I'll actually provide him my web service. So, and what I'll do, I'll actually make sure that web service provides whatever services are enabled for him. So that is something which we normally call as a remoting your services, right? Yes, it happens all the time. Right? Take an example of trading itself, right? So when trading is happening, right? So there are multiple clients who will show like Money Control or Reddit.com or Yahoo.com, right? Or so many other things. Let's say you have a Nasdaq stock exchange, right? Where every day trading is going on. So you want to see the index, you want to see the script movement up and down, you want to see the 52-week high and low. There are so many parameters which you want to check, let's say, right? Then you don't have to always go to Nasdaq site and check. You have many other sites to check. Now, how they are providing services? By actually taking your actual, these type of services are being exposed so that your third party can use this services of Nasdaq and they are showing the data. That's how it actually works. Fine. Similarly, so no, that's the reason why we normally call it as a routing very close to a remote areas. Fine. Now we can actually use our WCF for that. So these are the main advantages which we have when we use a middle layer or a business logic layer or a web service, right? While when compared to the two-tier application or directly writing all the business logics on a app layer. Right? Now let's come back to the WCF. Now here in WCF we have three very important components. So among three, the first one is the service class. Right, so this is the one where we are going to write a main methods which are related to our, which are mainly related to writing up actual business logics, right, which can be exposed to the remote or the one whoever is actually using my web service to get the data, right. And next is your hosted environment. So when we say hosted environment, right, so we can have multiple hosted environments. I can have IIS, which is a web server, right, wherever we can deploy a website, you can deploy your IIS, or in another machine, right, you can actually deploy your web service on IIS, right. So similarly you can, or you can directly deploy your application, WCF on console or Windows application, right. So and so on. Right, but in general, right, so if you're actually talking about your IAS, right, web server, obviously you go to deploy your web services on a web server and then consume it. Right? So we'll actually see that part, how we can actually create a web service deployable on IAS and use it for consuming. And then you have a very important thing called endpoints. So endpoints is the one which is like a nodes. We have end-to-end nodes, which is a main, because of endpoints we are able to communicate the web service with our applications. Right? So normally, in general, in WCF, we normally call ABC's endpoint. So ABC's is like you have an address, binding, and contract. Right? We have a direct ABC's, which is address, binding, and contract. Right? So address is something which is a URL. Normally, when we say A, it is address, right? So we have something like URL, a service URL maybe. I will see how the service URL, or we normally also call it a visitor, right? Web service dynamic link, right? Service URL which conveys where exactly my service is deployed, and I can access that for actually consuming services, right? And you have binding, which is a protocol binding, right? And you have a C, which is a contract. Now this contract is something which is new when compared to our legacy web service developments. Now everything in WCF, right? Whatever you are actually conveying, if you have to, whatever classes you are writing, whatever services you are writing, whatever interfaces you are writing, right? If you want to make sure that your WCF understands whatever you are actually doing, then you have to make everything as a service contract, or everything as a some contract, right? So it can be a service contract or a data contract or data number, whatever it can be. But yes, you have to actually make sure it is actually working in that way, right? So we'll see that part how we can actually use the contractual part, right? So here let's create a sample application now, sample WCF service application. Let me right click on the solution. So I'm going to create my WCF service application here. So let me create an add new project. So here you have an option called WCF. We are actually adding a type of project, right? So where you can see I can select my WCF application, service application. Here you have many, you have the library, you can directly create, which creates as a DLL, right? If you are creating this as a DLL, then you can actually use this as a deployable on a console application or a Windows application. Right now, let's say you have this web service application where you can see you can actually host this on IS, right? Whereas this is something which is a workflow management, right? In general, you have a workflows whenever you want to create, right? You can actually use this, right? So let's create this web service application and let's keep it as WCF service. Um, service layer. I'm just taking one name for this. Click on. So this is going to be a simple service. Now you can see here, as soon as I add my, uh, WCF service layer application, right? You can see two main important files were created, which is service one and your main service. So service one, you can see it starts with I. So if you remember, if you are creating an interface, right? So that interface file should always start with I, right? The I and then your service one. This is the interface always, right? And then if you're creating any class, then you can create class directly. Remember this. This is very important. So if we haven't talked about this, this is important. If you're creating any interface, right, you have to create it always with I, which means if you are creating your, let's say, while doing your assignment, right, if you remember, you have something called I disposable, right? I disposable. Why we have I disposable class or interface? That is an interface which starts with I. So you have to create interface with I disposable starting with I. Similarly, you have your service, which is your I interface being created here, which is I service one, and then you have a service layer, right? So here you can see there are many contracts which are actually many contracts we have. So let's understand, right, how all these actually contract works, right? Now, so here the first thing what we have to look here is the interface. So interface is the one which is a main driver for our service, where we are going to create all the operation contracts here. Now, operation contract means that we are going to create all the template methods which we have to use. Fine.